Is that the sound of Leeds falling apart? Can Chris Wilder's Blades maintain this fast start? A boring Burnley actually boring? And will Borja Sainz ever stop scoring? Look, I'm no Ali Maxwell, but I'm George Elek, and welcome to this Monday's episode of Not the Top 20. For those who didn't listen to Thursday's show, Ali and his wife welcomed a baby girl into the world last Tuesday. So he's taking some time off work, but don't worry, he'll be back soon. And don't worry, this is not a monologue pod, because I'm delighted to welcome Sky Sports football host, Sunderland non-exec director and long-time friend of the pod, Dave Jones, to join me as we chat through the weekend that was in the EFL with a bit of FA Cup sprinkled on top too. Dave, how are you?
I'm very well, George. Thank you very much for the introduction, and congratulations to Ali. And his life will never be the same again.
Yeah,
I wonder if he can cram in as many hours of viewing football as he has done up to this point in his life. He's going to, I mean, that's some bar you've set there as well, George, with that lyrical introduction.
Normally that's Ali's forte, and his are a lot longer than mine. And I thought I couldn't. You know, it's an homage to him, I guess, my attempt to do it. But yeah, I was lucky when when my daughter was born. She was born about 3 days before the World Cup in Qatar started. So I was kind of blessed in terms of my amount of football watching in the early weeks. But I've got a feeling that Ali's will still be able to get through his fair share when he's sitting on the sofa with a tiny little baby to cuddle.
Exactly, and at all hours, recording stuff. That's where Sky comes in very handy, when you can just revisit games through the middle of the night. Perfect. I've got my first plug-in as well.
There you go. Delighted to have you with us, David. You've actually hosted the pod before quite a long time ago. I don't know, I think Ali was on a cricket tour then, which kind of explains the sign of the times, previously missing pods for gallivanting around Europe and now having had a child. But yeah, delighted to have you with us. Obviously, FA Cup weekend this weekend, meaning fewer fixtures to get through. So we'll comb through the Championship games. And then we will look at a bit of FA Cup stuff and the two games that were in League Two. Before we do, quite exciting news. Now, Dave, I couldn't get you your NTT20 cap in time, sadly. But we have launched some merch for the first time. Those of you watching this on YouTube will see I'm wearing a hoodie that has the NTT20 logo on it. We've got hoodies, we've got quarter zips, we've got beanies, we've got caps, mugs, t-shirts. These went up on sale on Friday. Been great to see how many of you have already got involved. But if you do want to buy some good quality NTT20 merchandise, you can find the link in the show description to the shop, and you can order those there. We think they would be incredible presents for basically all of your family and friends for Christmas. So if you agree, make sure you go there and get stuck in. But it's time for us to get stuck into the football. And we're going to start, Dave, with Sunderland, who lost 1-0 away at Sheffield United in a game that was full of drama. Assuming you were watching this either on live on Sky or at the game.
I wasn't there. I watched it on Sky. I thought it was a great game, George. And obviously, it's very difficult for me watching Sunderland games. I don't often see the whole game because I'm watching my team and I'm watching our players. But what I would say is that I felt this was us getting back to our kind of levels, really. And even though ultimately we were massively disappointed to lose the game because I felt we deserved so much more, I thought it was a real big step in the right direction in terms of our performance. And I don't think we've ever been too far away in terms of that dip. But I did see, real positive signs in the Millwall game, and then this one as well, where we have hit back to where we expect to be in terms of our general performance. And if we continue to perform at that level, we're not going to be too far away, is my takeaway from that game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think in the first half especially, Sunderland played some really, really good stuff and caused a Sheffield United team who basically just don't concede goals at home. Only one goal conceded at home this season. Caused them real issues. It was a game full of drama, we should say. A penalty missed by Patrick Roberts in the first half. A brilliant save by Mike Cooper, who I think is a goalkeeper who's destined for the Premier League and to stay there once he gets there, for whether that's with Sheffield United or somebody else. 2 red card decisions. I'm interested to get your take on these, because it didn't seem to be contentious with the guys in the studio and commentary. But I don't think Chris Mepham's red card was a red card, because the way I saw it was that Tyrese Campbell goes through on goal and Mepham slides as if Tyrese Campbell would continue running at goal, but instead Campbell checks the ball backwards and therefore he's fouled. And the red card is for denying a clear goal scoring opportunity. But in my mind, it's basically impossible for Campbell to get a shot off because he's deliberately shifted the ball away from goal. So I would mean it's obviously a foul, but I think a yellow card would have sufficed.
There's a few things on that. Yes, it was a foul, and maybe it was worthy of a yellow card. It certainly wasn't a red card. My views is that if Campbell had been through on goal, that Mepham would have got the ball anyway, because that's where he sort of made the challenge. But clearly that touch is behind him. And therefore he has denied himself a goal scoring opportunity with that. And also the defender's on the cover as well. So, taking Mepham out of the equation, if he's brought that ball back behind him, the defender's going to be there to prevent a goal scoring opportunity anyway. I mean, as I speak to Premier League referees all the time in my role. And I've spoken to 3 different Premier League referees, and none of them think it was a red card. But by the same token, they and I understand why it was given, because it all happened very quickly, and I do have absolute sympathies with the official in that circumstance. If that happens in a Premier League game, I would expect VAR to get involved and intervene, and that red card to go away. And by the same token, I'm not sure that it would be worthy of an appeal, because there is just that little bit of cloud of uncertainty over whether it was a huge error or not on the referee's part. So I think it was very harsh. I think it robbed us of our best defender in the game, someone who has a calming influence on everybody around him. He's been a sensational signing, Chris Mepham. He really has. And his level of performance has just been extraordinary every single week. So we look forward to having him back in the team when he does come back. I think the other point you made on the studio, George, just on that, I just felt that the studio went to Chris Basham, who I thought was trying through his facial expressions to say, I don't think it is a red card, but with his Sheffield United hat on was saying it's definitely a red card. And I think in that circumstance, sometimes you only have 3 minutes at half time to get through all the incidents.
Yeah.
And therefore there probably wasn't time for Emma to challenge that decision, that comment, that opinion, because she had to get through all the other incidents that were there as well. So I had a feeling, and I know I spoke to the commentators as well during the game to give them my view on it, and I think they were probably on the same page as me. This is not me trying to influence their commentary, but I'm just saying, look, from my perspective, guys, this is never a red card, and I think they probably didn't disagree with that.
To clarify, I would never criticise anyone in the Sky studio, especially not someone as beautiful as Debbie McAnuff. So I wasn't doing that either. It is if I'd known you felt that strongly about it, I'd have played devil's advocate and said it was definitely a red, but I do have to agree with you. Harry Souttar also sent off for 2 yellows. I don't think there could be any arguments about those. The second one was a brilliant play from Wilson Isidore to spin him, and Souttar left kind of grasping at his shirt and pulling him down. The second half, Sheffield United came massively back into it. Siriki came off the bench at half time. My favourite thing I heard this week was my dad told me that when he was watching the Sheffield United-Oxford game in midweek, every time the commentator said Siriki, his phone popped up and said, with Siri, thinking that it was the commentator talking to his phone, which made me laugh. But yeah, Siriki having one shot saved at the near post, a decent effort. Goal itself, I think, was maybe the moment of the weekend. Tom Davies, a player who obviously broke through at Everton with a lot of promise, moved to Sheffield United last summer and has been plagued with really bad injuries, especially this hamstring issue that hasn't been able to get rid of it. And he's spoken in the press over the last few months about some pretty dark moments, struggling really to come to terms with his injury, struggling about not being able to play very much. Blades fans haven't seen much of him. So for him to score the goal, a very much a Tom Davies goal, rewarded for persistence, rewarded for being scrappy, and then a good finish, really well struck. I think it caught Patterson out a bit in terms of how well he struck it to get the winner, sparking some delirium at Sheffield United amongst their players. So even though, Dave, I'm sure you weren't particularly happy to see it, it had to be anyone. It's always good to see players who've been through it given their moment of glory, and Blades fans will hope that someone with some serious Premier League pedigree and someone who was signed by them to be a Premier League player last summer might prove to be an important player for them. What did you make of Blades? Because they sit top of the table now, despite that points deduction early in the season. Chris Wilder showing everybody who'd forgotten how good he can be when he gets his grip on a team.
Tom Davies, first of all, delighted for him. Well done, Tom. I'm not going to be any more effusive than that. I watched some of his early performances for Everton from the Sky studio, and people were talking about this being the next Brian Robson, his ability to go from box to box and impacted it at both ends. Showed great skill, I think, in some of his early performances in the final third, and really an eye for goal. So, I suppose we've all been wondering where that Tom Davies has got to. So, yeah, I am genuinely pleased for him. I can see through my rose-tinted glasses to see that was a lovely moment. Sheffield United, they're strong. They have a squad, I think, that most other teams in the Championship would happily swap theirs for. I don't say that that we would do that, because I'm perfectly happy with our squad at Sunderland. But I think a lot of teams would, because they have know-how, they have Championship guile and physicality. I think we saw that in that game, and they have quality and they have options as well. To be able to change the direction of game as and when they see fit. We do it in a different way. They've got the two powerhouses at centre half, and they try and play off them. They've still got players in the squad who you would think probably aren't too far away from Premier League level. I think there are questions on some of their recruitment last summer and whether they can actually make that step up. But they certainly will be. I think if you finish above Sheffield United, you're not too far away from automatic promotion. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I agree. Sheffield United going well and showing that, despite those back-to-back defeats against Leeds and Borough, there's some resilience there in bouncing back and maintaining this really good run. We're going to get on to the rest of the games later on, but obviously having Dave here, we're going to do a bit of a chat around Sunderland and the start to the season. And I think we have to start. I did Guardian Football Weekly this morning before this pod. Barry Glendenning is a Sunderland fan, and we were talking about the start to the season and the drop off, and he was saying how bad could it be, and my point was, I think if you showed Sunderland fans the league table at the beginning of the season before the ball was kicked on the 2nd of December, they'd have been absolutely over the moon. And as we mentioned, performances certainly against Millwall and Sheffield United showing still some massive promise. How good a job in your mind has Régis Le done? Because he was an unknown quantity for most of us, but you'd have been involved in some part in the recruitment process to bring him in.
I certainly would echo what you said there, George, in terms of if you just came to it blind and we hadn't been top of the league for that spell and looked at the table now, you'd be pretty happy with where you were. And also, if you said that we would go on this run without a win and still be in the position we're in, I think a lot of people would have bitten your hand off. Of course, it comes with a bit of disappointment given where we were and given the fact that we had opportunities to probably extend our time at the top of the table and extend our lead there. But to answer your question, Régis has done really well, but I don't think he's done probably that much better than we expected him to. I think we always felt we had the quality within the group to sustain a promotion challenge, and a lot of people might write the team off and the squad off because of the youthful element of it, and the fact that we are the youngest team. We never saw that as a weakness. We saw that as a strength. It was just a question of, could we add one or two to the group with experience and maybe a bit more quality to help those younger players find their feet a little bit faster than they ordinarily might. And I think you've seen that with the addition of Mepham at the back and also Alan Brown in midfield, although we haven't probably seen as much of him as we'd have liked, and Wilson Isidore at the top of the pitch. On Régis, I think that he has delivered what we expected him to. We saw a guy that was, first and foremost, a really good coach. And that's what we were looking for to come and lead our football club. I think, we're slightly different to a lot in the way that we run in terms of our structure and our processes. And we have a great deal of confidence in the way that we are organised as a football club. But I think we felt we were lacking that missing piece in terms of that coach who could deliver on all the promise and the potential. What he has done is made us a lot more compact as a team. We are much better now than we ever have been in terms of transition. And I think we have a confidence when we lose the ball that we're not suddenly going to be exposed and have strikers and shots bearing down on our goal. And I think you've seen that through our performances. There's a much better, more cohesive defensive structure. I think we just would like to add a little bit more in terms of going forward, in terms of creating a few more chances, having a few more shots in games so that we can sustain the position that we find ourselves in right now. I don't think anyone at the club is sort of, running around patting themselves on the back in the position that we're in, because I think we always felt the potential was there, and we haven't done anything yet. There is still a possibility of automatic promotion. Failing that, there is the possibility of playoffs, and I think we would certainly hope to be in the mix for both of those things at this stage.
Now, you've been involved. You were previously a non-exec director at Oxford. Now at Sunderland, you've been involved in a few recruitment processes. Obviously, the club came under some scrutiny off the back of the Mick Beale appointment, and then the time it took to replace Beale. But all well that ends well. And currently, I think no Sunderland fan would swap the process for what you've ended up with. But can you give us a bit of insight into how he became the candidate that got Sunderland, got the board effectively excited to appoint him?
Yeah, and we are revisiting a bit of old ground here, but I would say that in terms of the time it took to appoint him, that was not something that we were unduly worried about. A lot of Sunderland fans would probably be unhappy with that, because I think they felt that we almost gave up last season, and that was never the case. I think what we have learned, and we haven't got everything right, absolutely not. But I think what we've learned through the last couple of years is that it's a lot harder to find the right manager or the right coach during the middle of a season. And that process becomes a lot easier when you get to May and June, and clubs are reflecting, coaches themselves are reflecting, and there is a bit more movement in that market. So, we had to be patient. We were prepared to be patient, and that did allow a few more names to come into the frame. Régis was someone we knew of previously because of his track record in France, albeit over a very short period. But of course, we have French connections through our owner, Kirill Louis Dreyfus, who was involved with Marseille, and his family were involved in Marseille for such a long time. And, we were aware of the quality of his work, and Kirill was aware of the quality of his work through Lorient. And then there was the big drop-off. So when he wasn't available when he was finishing, I think it was 7th in Ligue 1, the highest position in their history. But he was when they had a much harder season the next time. And so he became on our list, and we were having conversations with a lot of people through that phase. Régis, we had spoken to a couple of times over Zoom, and we did that with everybody, really. We tried to have as many conversations as we possibly could, but we felt this was a guy that we needed to follow up with. So we found ourselves in front of him having conversations which lasted 5-6 hours. And at that point, it became apparent what we were dealing with here was a really serious football guy, a guy with genuine and very clear coaching qualities, almost professorial, George, in the way that he went about it. I think what surprised me a little bit is how well he sort of adapted to the Championship and to the English football culture, and the way that he's also been able to find a way to communicate with our fans as well. I think that was a question that I had after a couple of the initial meetings we had with him. But what he does have is this real natural authenticity as a human being, and he's got a real warmth to him. He doesn't try to pretend to be anything that he's not. And also, what really came through in those meetings was the humility that he had. He was really open about the challenges and the hardships that he'd found in the previous job, or the job that he currently was working in. And that really appealed to me. It's not very often that you hear football managers accept responsibility for things that have not gone well. But he did that, and I really like that as a sign of as him as a character. So we just hope it goes from strength to strength, really. It's about getting the right support systems around Régis, allowing him to do the job in the way that he wants to do it. He's very process-driven, George. He likes to take on a lot of the work himself in terms of the analysis. And sometimes there aren't enough hours in the day, especially in the Championship season when you're playing, as we did last week, Tuesday, Friday. So there are challenges for him. But so far, so good, and long may it continue. Also
interesting to note that he has a background in kind of youth development, given I don't think necessarily people outside of Sunderland have woken up to the level of young talent currently within the Sunderland side. Like, I think if you were to write a piece in 10 years saying where are they now of Sunderland's team at the moment, it's going to be quite special, because not only have you got Joe Bellingham, who certainly from my perspective has already gone past where I expected him to be at this stage of his development. You've got Chris Rigg, who is a generational talent who could go anywhere. Tom Watson, who's come into the side looking really lively currently. And the fullbacks, even Dennis Serkin and Trai Hume, who I think are both eminently capable of having careers at the top level. It's an unbelievably strong group of young players. And that, Dave, is both what's amazing is both it's the product of the academy, but also some really inventive, good recruitment.
Yeah, and some stubborn decision making probably from the hierarchy at the football club as well, which is difficult because you've got to maintain your path, your cause, when the noise outside is telling you that what you're doing is not right and it's not what everybody else is doing. So we couldn't be happier with the way that the team is progressing. I think what we've seen, and Tommy Watson being a really interesting example of this in recent weeks, is that when players get their opportunity and they get their stint in the team, and I'm not talking about come in for one game and play in a position that perhaps wouldn't be the one that you choose, you get a run of 3 or 4 games in the side, and you see how these young lads are capable of taking that opportunity and just growing week by week. And that is what we've done as a course of action, and I think you could say you've name checked most of them there. You've seen how these players have responded to those opportunities, that level of game time, and of course we want to keep them for as long as we possibly can, and we hope that our development mirrors that of our players. There will be the odd instance where perhaps that individual's development is accelerated beyond ours. In which case you have to be able to, and you have to be willing to say, okay, well, if this player is desperate to leave us at this point in our journey and there is a deal that is beneficial to the football club, then you have to be able to say that we'll do that. Because to convince those young players there is a pathway in the first place, you also have to show them that there is a way beyond the football club if our development doesn't match their own.
Yeah, Joe Bellingham, someone who's already being linked to some big clubs around Europe, and unsurprisingly Borussia Dortmund being one of those. But ignoring the kind of surname and ignoring kind of who he's being linked to as well, seeing him drop back into the midfield role where we're seeing him get on the ball facing goal, which to me is so important. My last season where he had to play out front quite a lot, it seemed to detract quite a lot from his explosive nature and his ability to drive Sunderland up the pitch. How good could he be? Because I think there's an assumption now that whilst he may not go on to be a Ballon d'Or contender, he's certainly someone who I'm expecting probably to have, in the pretty immediate future, a career at the top level. I
don't see why he couldn't be a Ballon d'Or contender. I wouldn't actually put any obstacles in the way of Joe Bellingham. I think this is a young lad, of course, who came to us with a big reputation, but almost in the shadow of his brother. I think everyone can see that because his brother's had this extraordinary early development, but that shouldn't detract from what people think about Joe, who is his own player, hence you see it on the back of his shirt. I totally agree with you that his development is way beyond expectation. And, I think we have seen at Sunderland how different he has been from one season to the next. So what is he still only 19? So who's to say that in a year's time he might have gone up another couple of levels, and a year after that he's gone up another couple of levels. He's shown a versatility that I think that people weren't aware of. Yeah, he played up front last season. He also played 10. He also played 8, and now we've seen him play 6 this season and have that more disciplined role. He can do all of it, George. I don't think there's anything stopping Job going right to the very top of the game. From my experience of working with people like Graham Souness and Roy Keane and Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville, players who played hundreds of football matches at the elite level, the one thing that unites all of those people as individuals is their character, and it's their heart, and it's their brain, and it's their willingness to push themselves beyond the norm, beyond everyone else in their peer group. And we see this every single week with Job, but not just Job. I mean, that's the beauty of some of those names that you've read out. I mean, just in terms of our midfield, when you think about the generational talent that you mentioned, Chris Rigg and Dan Neil as well, who's still only 22 and our captain, has played now a couple of 100 games of EFL football. They share those qualities. So we are so lucky, but also they've been lucky to have a platform that we've given them. I think it's a two-way street. But I'm not putting any limits on Job as an individual.
Exciting. Before we get into the rest of the games, just a couple more bits on Sunderland I want to pick your brains on. Firstly, Wilson Isidore, and this is, he looks like a very, very strong signing, and he looks to maybe kind of be the missing piece of the jigsaw from Sunderland fans. Have been desperate for a striker for quite some time now, since Ross Stewart's initial injury and then leaving the club. But as a wider point, we see managers and clubs, especially at championship level, but kind of throughout the game, bemoaning the lack of options when it comes to recruiting a striker, effectively saying that there are fewer strikers around and those who are of the requisite quality are very, very hard to get hold of. With Sunderland having looked, obviously Rooney came in the summer before and he's still at the club and plays a part, but maybe didn't have the impact that was hoped for. Having finally found Isidore now on loan, albeit with the option to make that permanent in the summer, how big an issue is this? Because it feels like going into January, of the 24 sides in the Championship, I reckon Sunderland are one of very few who are probably looking for a starting striker.
One of few who are or who are not?
Well, I was going to say, one of who probably have, I'll rephrase that, one of whom who have a starting striker they're happy with, albeit they probably want another one as well.
I keep reminding Christian and Kirill that Ipswich Town. How many strikers did they have last season in their promotion season? I'm off the top of my head, I want to say at least 4, maybe more than that. That they were able to rotate, and you'd often see Kieran McKenna get to 70 minutes and throw on change his entire front line, and quite often they would be scoring goals in 90 plus minutes as a result of that. So I don't think you can ever have too many, would be my view, but then I'm not the one who has to answer to the budgets at the end of the day. It is an issue, George, and it's the hardest position I think to recruit for, just simply because there are a couple of things on it, but one is that trend away from number 9s, and I think the game is almost coming back to that bit where it wants a number 9, and it wants someone who can hold the ball up and can lead the press from the front, but also run channels, also instigate that press, have the intelligence to do that, and also be able to score the tap-in goals, but also be able to create something from nothing. And that is a really hard thing that you're looking for, especially when you are working on constraints of a budget. You get this different tiers of strikers, especially when you're driven by focusing on players of a certain age bracket as well, as we as a football club, as I said, make no apologies for. But then you've got those guys that are coming out of Premier League clubs, the ones that perhaps have struggled to make that leap with your top tier of Premier League club, the ones who've been able to have their cherry pick in terms of their academies. I'm talking about the likes of Tom Cannon, Liam Delap, these guys, even Ellis Sims, and look at the prices that these young lads are going for. It's very difficult for a club like us in this stage of our development to be able to fight at those levels and compete at those levels. So then you have to be a bit more creative. You have to widen your net. I think Régis helped us open our eyes up to a different kind of market, and obviously knows a lot of players that we weren't familiar with through his background in French youth football, as well as Ligue 1. And that helped us lead us to Wilson's door. Wilson's an interesting one because he's when you're trying to do recruitment, George, you're not just trying to sign a really good player, but you're also trying to sign really good people. And I think he's just surprised everyone with the character that he is and how much he's bought into Sunderland, not just as a club, but also the city and the wider region as well. He's been a brilliant, infectious personality. He's an interesting one in terms of his player, because I think naturally he'd want to peel off the left a bit in that sort of Thierry Henry sort of style. He'd want to start from the left-hand side, but he came into a team with Jack Clark on that side, and then Romain Mundell, and then trying to find the balance when he's got into the team of where actually his qualities suit us best. And I think we have found that has been through the middle of the pitch, really aids the team in terms of that counter-attack, which we've shown a couple of times in games, that speed of transition that he's really helped with. He wants to shoot from everywhere. I'd like to probably see him maybe focus his shooting on as an XG nerd in more obvious goal scoring positions, but I think you could say that about the whole team. He's been a really good acquisition. These players are really hard to find, but the one thing I didn't say, George, is sometimes you need a little bit of luck. You need a little bit of luck, and it's whether they hit the ground running. It helps that he speaks English as well. That he is the kind of character that naturally is happy in the new environment that he's in, and we've certainly seen that with Wilson.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, his goal against Oxford, as much as I didn't enjoy watching it go in, was a goal of some serious quality, an amazing finish on the volley with the ball dipping over his shoulder, and a player that looks very, very good indeed. We're going to move on now to Blackburn 1, Leeds 0, but kind of as a segue into it, I want to ask you something that was mentioned in commentary yesterday in the game between when Sheffield Wednesday beating Derby 2-1, and Gary Weaver on commentary brought up there that in the Championship, and it stands alone, it's not the rest of football, just in the Championship, away wins are massively down, with loads of teams really struggling to win games on the road. Now, it's interesting because Sunderland do and don't fall into that category, do in the fact that there is quite a big drop-off from home output to away output, with just 4 goals conceded at home and winning 5 of 8 games. Away from home, Sunderland have still won 4 of their 10 games and actually sit third, equal with Sheffield United in the away league table, albeit the 4 games that Sunderland have won have been against teams in 19th, 20th, 22nd and 24th in the table. So that might have something to do with it. Do you have any kind of... I mean, I find it always bizarre anyway how there can be such a big difference between teams' home performance and away performance. But it does feel like, for whatever reason, this season, specifically in the Championship, there are very, very few teams who seem to enjoy playing away.
I would have absolutely no idea, George, and I would think that's just something that might be secular and, might just be a strange quirk of this season, and next season it might be the other way round. In terms of us, I think we've sort of flip-flopped a little bit, and I think what we've tried to stress is the value of winning games at home when you have got the size of support that we have, and it just helps carry your football club in the right direction if you are winning in front of your own fans and your own fan base is being entertained. And I think that's a key part as well, and a key word, and that's something that I certainly stress at board level, is that we have to entertain our public and make sure that when they're coming to watch their own team every couple of weeks, that they are doing so not through duress. They're doing so, they're looking forward to coming to the game. They're going to be excited watching their team. They're going to be entertained, and hopefully they're going to go home having watched their team win as well. And I probably do see it as, if you can win away from home, then it's a bit of a bonus as well. It's obviously a lot harder to do that against the very best teams like Sheffield United and Leeds United. But if you can cherry pick away wins elsewhere, it's certainly, like you say, we're 4th in that table right now. And if you can do that, if you can be around that sort of place, but whilst winning your home games, I think you're in a really strong position.
Right, for those of you who scrubbed through the Sunderland section, welcome. This is now the period where we are going to be talking through the rest of the Championship action, starting with Blackburn 1, Leeds 0. Dave and I are going to reverse roles. I'm going to become Neville and Carragher combined. Dave's going to become Dave Jones.
Oh, everyone's going to be taking a huge sigh of relief now, George. This is our natural elements that we're going to find ourselves in. So welcome to this part of the NTT20 pod. I'm Dave Jones. You might recognise me from networks such as Sky Sports. And here we go then. So let's kick off, George, by talking about Blackburn Rovers, where I'm very much looking forward to visiting on Boxing Day. They have, and I'm not sure what we're going to get, actually. It sounds like we could be in for a tough assignment on Boxing Day. What a week they've had. 2 1-0 wins against 2 of the best sides in the division. Did you see this coming against Leeds United?
Probably not. No. I mean, Leeds, as we just spoke about a second ago, are one of these teams who, at home, it feels like teams can't really get anywhere near Leeds. Burnley beat them 1-0 in a game where Leeds were the dominant force but couldn't find a way, and Burnley scored one of their few forays forward. But Leeds on the road have really struggled to win games. The games they've won 3 of them have been against Sheffield Wednesday, Swansea and Cardiff, who all currently sit in the bottom half. And that Swansea result was obviously, they were behind twice in the game and scored very late in order to win the game 4-3. But against teams currently in the top half, they've only won 1, Sheffield Wednesday 2-0, but they've drawn 4 and lost 2. And there seems to be an issue where they really struggle, especially having gone behind, to kind of find their way back into games. There was the really good game against Sunderland 2-2. That was probably Leeds' best performance away from home in what felt like a very big game at the moment. It was it was the top side in the league facing against the favourites. But generally their away form has been pretty poor. And this, normally I think when you see title favourites lose on the road, you look at the game and you see they've dominated, they haven't taken their chances. The hosts have managed to squeeze one in, but that wasn't the case here at all. Blackburn were probably the better team within the game. Todd Cantwell, the star man, he scored the penalty to send Rovers ahead, but also missed two massive opportunities to make it 2-0. Leeds had a goal disallowed correctly for an offside, but struggled to really kind of mount the kind of pressure you'd expect Leeds to manage. And this, I'm still very much of the belief that Leeds are the best team in the league and that Leeds will win the league. But Daniel Farke, they seem the gap between them and the teams they play against at home is just so wide. The gulf is huge, and it's very unlikely in my mind that they're not going to win the majority of those games, especially because they can concede so few chances. But Farke has to work out a way to improve them away from home. Otherwise, I think they might struggle to justify that favouritism. And also Todd Cantwell, obviously up against his former manager, Daniel Farke, showing, in my mind, why it was such a brilliant bit of business for Blackburn to get him in. Because quality-wise, there aren't many better at his best in the league.
I think it's really interesting, and it was an eye-catching scoreline, this, which I didn't expect, I have to say, George. And you talk about the Sunderland game, and I'm going to try not to keep banging on about Sunderland. But what I would say in that game, that Leeds performed to a level far above anything that I've seen from any other Championship team so far this season. And what really impressed me about us in that game was that we managed to stay in it, because there were times when I felt that Leeds were just going to blow us away, but that didn't happen. And I would say that Leeds are, as you say, the best team in the league, and I would expect them to win the league from this position right now. I think they've just got much more going forward than anybody else. I think, in fact, probably we're the closest in terms of the quality that I've seen from any of the team so far. But this is interesting because you've got these teams like Blackburn who are capable, that they're not going away right now, are they, Blackburns? There is just this little cluster of teams below the top 4 or 5 who are right in the mix. As ever in the Championship, I think you can go down to the top 10. Do you think that Blackburn can sustain what we're seeing from them?
I don't see why not. I think John Eustace is a manager who's kind of tailor-made for this kind of assignment, where they may not have the depth of quality as a Leeds or a Sunderland or the star power, but what they do have is a manager who is very, very good at drilling a side to be able to deal with good attacking sides. And it's telling that when you look at their 2 wins this week, they went to Borough and they beat them, albeit Borough with a couple of issues in terms of players who are absent, Finn Azaz being a key one. But Borough only managed 2 shots on target of an XG of 0.66. So to keep a Borough side who are so free scoring, who return to their free scoring ways, as we'll talk about in a second on the weekend, was impressive. And then again against Leeds, where they've gone ahead after 22 minutes, and you would think from then it would be a bit of an onslaught. But Leeds, again, only managed 2 shots on target, an XG of just over 1. And that is, in my mind, a pretty good blueprint for success for Eustace and his side. If they can be a team that can confidently go to some of the best teams in the league and concede very little by way of chance, then that gives them the opportunity to pick up points. So I'm not going to sit here and say I think they're going to challenge the top end, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if Blackburn were, if there is going to be a team or two who upset the perceived top 6, I think they've definitely got a hope of doing it.
A team to watch. Blackburn Rovers going very well. Very good win for them. Any win over Leeds United, I think this season is one to celebrate. Burnley, of course, are right there as well in the mix, George, and another win to 0. They're 4th in a row. They're 8th this season. But did they show a little bit more in terms of going forwards in this game?
Yeah, I think so. And this is where, Dave, I don't know if you've listened to the pod recently, but I'm going to push something called the FOTMob Corner button. And this is a segment of the show sponsored by FOTMob. You can download the app in the description of the show where we look at a team in depth. And this will be the part of the pod that is a bit of a monologue as I run through where Burnley are and their, frankly, quite incredible start to the season, where up to this level they have conceded 6 goals, which to our mind is the fewest any team has conceded in the Championship up to this part of the season. So is it sustainable? Are they going to manage to keep this up for the rest of the campaign? They currently sit in second, 2 points behind Sheffield United, 1 point clear of Leeds, and you can see there in their goal difference 23 goals scored, which isn't very many from 18 games, but 6 goals conceded means it's going to be a pretty reliable way to pick up points. Looking through their games so far this season, their first 2 games finished 4-1 and 5-0, which was a pretty bad indicator as to how the season would go. And looking at the numbers and the shot maps from those games, it's pretty clear to see that this wasn't going to be, despite the scorelines, the suggestion wasn't this was going to be a free-scoring team. Against Luton on opening day, 11 shots to 10, just 1.46 XG for their 4 goals. Just after that, against Cardiff, they scored 5 goals from 4 shots on target, which I think must be a first, and that was due to an own goal. 5 goals, it was from 0.81 expected. So again, you're seeing there that despite the initial results, maybe the signs were there that this wasn't going to be a team who were going to maintain scoring 4 and 5 every week. However, when it comes to a kind of the way I guess that the games have gone for them, looking that there was a period of time a couple of weeks ago where I started to get pretty concerned about them, and I kind of thought that they were going to be a team that dropped off pretty quickly. To pinpoint a couple, there was a 0-0 draw at home to Preston aside, who have had a decent run of form under when Paul Heckingbottom first took over, but are a team who are, in my mind, very much one of the sides who need to avoid relegation this season. And at home against them, created very, very little, an XG of 0.46. And then in the 1-0 away defeat at Millwall, again, just 0.2 expected goals. So even though they're not conceding much or many goals at all, if your chance creation is that poor, especially with the quality of player that you've got at your disposal, even someone like Luca Kolyosho, who showed in the Premier League last season what a player he is, Jayden Anthony, who's a player I'll talk about in a second, who I'm really impressed with, Lyle Foster up front, Jay Rodriguez is back now, Josh Brownhill, like these are players who have either proven elsewhere how good they are, or just 2 seasons ago under Vincent Kompany in the Championship showed what they can do in a really good attacking side. That defeat against Millwall seemed to instigate a bit of a change of tactic from Scott Parker, who initially was playing front man with Anthony and Kolyosho on the wings, and then effectively a midfield 3 of Brownhill, Cullen and Laurent, effectively like a pretty bog standard 4-3-3. He seemingly noted that he needed to bring one out of midfield and basically get another man, another body further forward, and that has come in the way of Zion Fleming at times, but we saw in the team on Saturday against Stoke, it was Sarmiento who played as the 10 with Laurent and Cullen sitting. Now this does pose a bit of an issue because you've got 3 players in Cullen, Laurent and Brownhill who are all exceptionally good players, and it seems pretty obvious that Scott Parker was desperate to get all 3 of them in the team. But given how poor they were from an attacking standpoint, I think he's now understood and accepted that one of them is going to have to make way. And it was Brownhill on Saturday. He came off the bench. He scored a goal. He's a player who will have a massive part to play in this Burnley season going forward. But it's just enabled them to carry a little bit more threat. And Sarmiento certainly did that. And yeah, to answer your question from about 5 minutes ago, Dave, they were much better. They did create way more. It was 16 shots against Stoke away from home, 2.95 XG, tempered slightly by the fact that they conceded a bit more as well. I think that is often the case if you're a really good defensive side who don't create much. If you do take a man out of midfield and you try and commit more men forward, it often comes at a cost. But their XG this season over the course of the campaign is 20.3. That ranks them 17th in the whole league. I can't imagine there's been a team who've been promoted out of the Championship with an expected goals that low, and they are overperforming a little bit. 23 goals scored, nothing to be too concerned about. Shots on target again 3.6 per 90, so 16th in the league. The interesting part is the defensive side of things, where, as we say, that this is a record at the moment, 6 goals conceded. But that's from 13.9 expected. So massively overperforming their expected goals against, and probably suggesting that it might not be sustainable for them to continue keeping as many clean sheets as they currently are. Leeds, who've conceded 13 goals this season, have a lower expected goals against over the course of the campaign. Sheffield United, who've conceded 9 goals, 16.3. So both Blades and Burnley maybe overperforming a little bit there. Part of that will be James Trafford, their keeper, who is someone who shouldn't be playing in the Championship. It is only doing so because of the high fee that Burnley paid and then relegation. Someone who's already been involved in England squads. His goals prevented is already 3.08, which when you consider they haven't faced that many shots is pretty impressive. A save percentage of 83.8, showing he is as good a shot stopper as you're probably going to get in the Championship. And then if we look at FotMob's ratings of players, of their top 5, you've got Egan, Riley, Trafford, Pires and Roberts as the top 4 with Brownhill in 5th. So only Esteve, the only defender who isn't in that top 5, again showing that individually the defenders are doing pretty impressive things. There is, from an attacking point of view, that they need to find more goals, because Brownhill's currently their top scorer on 6. But when you're looking at players who you'd expect to be in amongst the goals, Foster's just got 1, Rodriguez has got 2, got a second of the season last weekend, Oliosho's got 2, Sarmiento's got 2, Anthony's got 2, but they are probably, as we spoke about in the Isidore chat, Dave, they're a team who need a starting striker who can be someone they can rely on to score goals, albeit I would argue that maybe chance creation is their bigger issue rather than finishing. One player I expect to be really important from here on is Jayden Anthony. 2 goals this season, but his shot map is pretty impressive. He's someone who drifts inside from that right-hand side and gets into central shooting positions. He's creative as well, 2 assists already this season, and a really good ball carrier. And if we are going to see Parker take the handbrake off a little bit, I think he's someone who could really benefit from that, and he's caught my eye recently. So better. I think Burnley are improving, and I think Parker, who stresses the point that this is a young side and a developing side. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they do improve, but the defensive numbers are maybe a little red flag that they have to improve, because they're not going to continue keeping the clean sheets at the rate they currently are.
I think they're in a nice position, George, and I think it's interesting the way that Scott Parker's gone about this challenge. Actually, I suppose if you ask the average Championship punter, or what kind of manager you would expect Scott Parker to be, looking at the teams that he's had previously, it would be, quite an attacking manager. I think that would be fair to say. So maybe he's just gone in with a little bit of a cautious approach, and probably feels that he's got enough to win games. He's got enough quality to win games if he can keep it tight. But he's a sharp guy, Scott, and he's an intelligent man. And I think he will be looking at those numbers himself and thinking, yeah, they have to do better. But I think if you're in a position where you've got Josh Brownhill on the bench, I think you're in a very fortunate position in this Championship season. I would say that Stoke are just a really interesting football club to me. They change managers like the wind. How's this one getting on?
I mean, it's interesting because Narkis Pelak has never. Well, he managed a club a fair while ago, but not a professional club and not one in the Championship. And I personally think you can't really judge what he's doing until September, October next season. He's come into a club that are massively underperforming, who, as you say, have chopped and changed managers pretty consistently. They're not winning many games, but they're not losing many games. It's the second defeat in their last 11, but they've only won 3 in that time. I think he is perfectly entitled, walking into a difficult job, to spend this time kind of getting the hang of it and getting used to it and understanding what it's all about. He seems to be doing a decent enough job of ensuring they're not going to be sucked into a relegation battle. They're not playing any the kind of football that is suggesting to me right now that they're going to catch fire between now and the end of the season. I would say that Tom Cannon looks really lively. He's a player that I think Stoke did really well to get in, and he's someone who looks like he's getting the service needed to score a lot of goals, and he's given his finishing ability. I'm sure he will do that. But this was a difficult game for them, where they struggled with Burnley's quality. But I think he's doing fine. I think, as I say, I think I would be very, very difficult to criticise him at this point. But similarly, I don't think we can necessarily say that we're seeing loads to suggest that he's got it right now.
Good luck. Good luck getting through to September, October without being judged. That's all I would say as a Stoke City manager.
It's my job, though.
Right, Middlesbrough 3, Hull City 1. We will come on to Borough, but Hull City took the decision to dispense with the services of Liam Rosenior, and it didn't work. Tim Walter sacked since the last pod, George. So how do we view this right now, and who does it look like the runners and riders are?
I think in terms of how do you view it, when you've sacked a manager in the summer and you've replaced him with someone else, and then you sack the replacement in December, and the manager that you've sacked has since become completely unattainable to your football club, it doesn't it doesn't reflect particularly well on the decision. Rosenior doing a decent job at Strasbourg now in Ligue 1. The reason for his sacking was seemingly style of play issues. Brought in Tim Walter, who seemingly had a reputation to play a certain way, and they haven't been very good. It hasn't been great to watch. It hasn't been particularly entertaining. The results have been fairly poor, and the fact that Ashwin initially supposedly told local journals that there was no way that Walter would be sacked, and then watched them being dispatched by Sheffield Wednesday midweek and decided actually that he was going to sack him, doesn't reflect particularly well on the owner either. A couple of really interesting names being linked in terms of Slavica Kanovic, who I think kind of fits perfectly as to what Ashwin wants from his manager, where he has achieved success at Championship level with both Watford and with Fulham, playing a really expansive, exciting style of football, Having said that, last time we saw him was after Sheffield United's relegation out of the Premier League. It was terrible. And then he was replaced by Paul Heckingbottom, who took Sheffield United up to the Premier League. So that is a bit of an issue, but I would always say that, you know, if you're quick to judge a manager off one poor spell, then and you know, you can't really ignore the good stuff they've done in the past. And then Chris Hughton is the other one who's been linked to the post, which I find very hard to wrap my head around if Ashwin Ilashli is after entertainment. Not that Chris Hughton isn't a very good manager and someone who's achieved results, he absolutely has, but he strikes me as someone who you'd bring in as a safe pair of hands to sort out defensive issues. And maybe this is an indication, if the links to Hughton are in fact correct, that he understands the predicament that Hull are in, and that if they don't get this appointment right and they don't sort themselves out defensively, then relegation to League One is a genuine concern, especially given that this is an owner who has big ambitions to turn Hull into a Premier League club.
I mean, two very, very different people you've talked about, George, obviously. And one thing I would say is whatever you do as punters is completely ignore manager betting markets. That is my advice to you as someone who's been in a position of being on the other side and interviewing managers, I don't know, 5 or 6 different occasions, perhaps a little bit more than that, with Oxford and Sunderland. The betting markets very rarely bear any correlation to what's actually going on the inside. So I would take that as a note of caution.
I was going to say the Jokanovic link is pretty widely reported from reputable sources. The Hughton one less so.
Okay.
Maybe you can give us an exclusive, Dave, and say it's not.
No, what I would say on Chris Hughton, except all you've said on Chris Hughton, I think you summed it up really well. There was a stage, I'm probably going back 4 or 5 years, where if I had the power at a football club to appoint Chris Hughton, I would have done. Because he, for me, was the model guy in terms of if your football club is fractured at all, if it's in need of an arm round it and a bit of a cuddle. He is one of the best human beings I think I've met in any walk of life. I would say that about Chris Hughton. I think he did a brilliant job in his previous incarnation at Newcastle. Brighton, one of the clubs that I respect more than any other, took it upon themselves to use Chris Hughton to get them to the level they wanted to be at before deciding to go in a very different footballing direction. If they saw fit to appoint him, then clearly he has great qualities as a man and as a human being. I think probably Chris. Yeah, if you're looking for entertainment, I totally agree. Then Chris probably isn't your guy, because he's going to look after your football club. He's going to try and make you solid and stable. And I'm not sure. I don't think any of us are sure really what it is that Hull City are looking for right now. But they do have some interesting players, George. I'm thinking about the likes of Abu Kamara, Mason Burstow. Obviously, I know reasonably well. Is there talent coming into this team that a new manager would feel there is a chance to get them progressing in the right direction?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Kamara in particular is someone who, you know, what we saw him do in creating the goal for Burstow is what we saw him do a lot for Pompey last season, getting down the left-hand side, quality delivery. He's someone who, you know, played on the right a lot for Pompey last season, but is comfortable on both flanks, a great left foot, and someone who I'm sure the new manager will look forward to working with. Charlie Hughes at centre-back, who they signed from Wigan, is a brilliant ball-playing defender. There's definite quality within the side. Another team that probably need a front man. Whether Burstow's that, I'm not sure. It feels like he has had a difficult career to date. You know, he's someone who was signed from Charlton by Chelsea, came in at Sunderland, who were desperate for a striker at the time and struggled to really make an impact. He's probably someone who really needed that goal, I would say, on Saturday. Needs a bit of confidence, needs a bit of love, and needs to be in a environment conducive to his own development, which I'm not necessarily sure Hull is right now. They need results now rather than, I guess, a project for the future.
Yeah, Mason's an interesting one. He's a lovely, lovely boy, and I really hope this move works out for him. But I would agree that he probably just needs to find his level right now at this stage of his development. And whether it doesn't matter if that's League One or the Championship or the Premier League, it's where he feels confident and where he's able to develop as a footballer by playing consistently and contributing consistently to the team and its output. And maybe it's not. We will find out in due course. Maybe it's the next manager will unlock Mason Burstow, because I think we all think that there is potential there. But really, this story is about Middlesbrough, George, and obviously they are a team that I keep a close eye on. And They surprised me. I thought they were nailed on to winning the week as well, so they bounced back here. And who are the familiar faces and names catching the eye again for Middlesbrough?
Yeah, I feel like a broken record talking about Borough on this pod because it's always Ben Doak and it's always Finn Azaz. They are both just lighting up the Riverside every time they play there. The fact that Azaz was missing in midweek and came back and their attacking output improved isn't a coincidence. He's a nominally right-footed player. He gets the ball just outside the area on his right foot and shifts it onto his left and plants it into the top corner. His long-range shooting ability is unbelievable. His creative passing ability is incredible. If I was to do a Player of the Season award now in the Championship, I think it would probably be between him and Borja Sainz. I'm a massive fan. And I just, obviously his mobility isn't the best and that might be an issue with him as he tries to progress his career up the leagues. But in terms of the quality within his feet and what he's able to do with the football and the damage he can inflict on an opponent with both his creating and goal scoring exploits, he's just a magnificent player and someone who's growing in stature every game for Borough. And then Ben Doak on the right hand side, who quality of his cross for Tommy Conway's first goal for the header is so good, and it's something you never really see, where he stands up, he gets down the right hand side as he often does, beats his defender, gets his head up, and he plays this scooped. It's like a messy finish. It's a scoop up to the back post where Conway plants it into the far corner. And it's also the embarrassment of riches that they have up front, where, again, a brilliant bit of a recruitment, Tommy Conway from Bristol City, someone who had looked sharp in moments but hadn't consistently done it. And they brought him in to compete with Lath for that striker role. Carrick tried to play them both in midweek in Azaz's absence, played Conway as a 10. It didn't really work. He's not a 10. He's a goal scorer. And they have this... I guess they're probably the envy of most of the league in that they've got two strikers who are scoring goals basically whenever they play for them, who are competing for that starting spot. Two brilliant finishes from Conway. The fact that Lath scored a hat-trick one Saturday, drew a blank in midweek and then was dropped for the week after just shows the options that Carrick has. And to put that defeat behind them in midweek with this resounding win, they're a team that I think is a neutral. They're as good a team to watch as anyone in the league. And having previously not been fully sold on not as sold as some on Carrick, I think we're now seeing the development of one of the most exciting head coaches in English football. I
think they're doing a lot right at the moment, George, and I have to give them praise for as much as it pains me, they've got loads of attacking options. It starts at the top though, George. Steve Gibson, to his huge credit, keeps investing in his football club, and this time is sticking with the guy. And they haven't done that well enough for me, Middlesbrough, in recent seasons. They've chopped and changed in direction, in styles, quite dramatically, I think, in recent years. But they've recognised there is talent in Michael Carrick, and he is someone that they need to stick with. And I think they are getting the rewards for those decisions right now. And there is stability at the football club, and I think they will be very much in contention. Certainly one of the best teams in the North East right now, Middlesbrough. We've still got to go there. Right, Norwich 4, Luton Town 2. 10 goals in a week for Norwich City, George. What's changed besides your man, Borja Sainz?
It's so easy. Kenny McLean comes back into the team and he scored 10 goals. That's all it is. It's that simple. But they've had a lot of injury issues. Josh Sargent obviously still out, but they've kind of lacked their midfielders really lacked two key players in Marcelino Nunez and Kenny McLean. And McLean in particular coming back has just given them a really solid foundation from which the likes of Sainz and Tissernic and other key players can provide from. Obviously a midweek win over Plymouth Argyle, albeit that the manner of it, 6-1, and Borja Sainz getting a hat-trick was impressive. But Argyle on the road are, as we'll get on to shortly, just unbelievably poor. So I think this one is probably more striking, albeit Luton not enjoying themselves at the moment. To beat them 4-2, to follow up the 6 goals with another 4, with Sainz getting on the score sheet again. Cernach, a player they signed for a lot of money, who's kind of yet to really flourish, with 3 goals in the week is important for him, 2 really well-taken goals. And after a bit of a wobble with the players who are out, with Angus Gunn back in goal as well, it feels like Norwich have found their mojo again. And I guess, getting key players back and then playing Argyle and Luton back-to-back at home is probably a pretty good way to breathe some life into their season.
I've just realised what this podcast is doing for me, George. It's just making me really anxious and nervous because I'm so blinkered about my own team. Will someone say to me, "Oh, what about? How do you think about
everyone else is terrible?"
I don't know, because I'm just looking at Sunderland. That's all I care about. And people say, "Oh, they won again," or they're checking the results. Don't care. Forget everyone else. But this podcast is making me realise that the depth of quality that's out there in the Championship as well. And Norwich City, I'm gathering, are a team that you fully expect to be right there.
Yeah, I mean, they were 7 without a win going into the Argyle game. And as I said, I'd say the key part to that was George Long for Angus Gunn is a downgrade, frankly, and that cost them points. Key players out cost them points, but they've got a lot of quality. And they're a club that are putting some faith into a guy, and they're building slowly. And in Borja Sainz, they've got a player who, it's very different watching Sainz now to previously in the season, where you can see that he's someone in front of our eyes who is starting to believe in his own hype, and he is just a rampant goal threat, like relentless in terms of when he's on the ball, a really direct goal threat. He should probably pass more, but he just thinks he's going to score with every shot. And, I saw Norwich on opening day get beat 2-0 by Oxford. And if you'd told me then that Borja Sainz was going to score 15 goals by the beginning of December, I'd have called you mad, because he was ineffective that day. But, it's amazing to see what goals and confidence can do to a team. And right now, I would almost say that Sargent's injury has been the best thing for Sainz, because even though he's still nominally playing off the left, he's just given license to do what he wants in the final third to devistating effect.
So he's got 15 goals, George. What's his XG? Do you know? Get those fingers typing.
We did this on FOTMob Corner before all of these, but I can tell you it is, according to our friends at FOTMob, 8.22. So 15 goals.
So it's never going to last. It's never going to last.
Well, early on in the season, he was scoring worldies. Now he's scoring like strikers' goals, and that's the thing. He's kind of the goals he's scoring has changed a bit. And Ali did a very good bit that actually Johannes Hop Thorup was asked about in his press conference, basically with showing Sainz's shot map from last season and Sainz's shot map from this season, and that clump just in that inside left-hand channel has just basically moved forward about 5 yards, and that seems to be the main difference.
I was looking at this yesterday with Erling Haaland ahead of the Liverpool City game, that he was outperforming his XG. He was outperforming his XG by 4, and then he's regressed, and now in the last period he's underperforming his XG by 4. So he has regressed to the mean. Obviously, he's a very different kind of player. Well, let's see if it does continue for Norwich City, and let's see if this poor form as well continues for Luton Town. What do we make of Rob Edwards and the way he's handling himself right now, George? I
was kind of relieved to see the way that he carried himself off the back of this, because after the Borough 5-1 defeat, he looked like he'd kind of given up, and he spoke about not wanting to be a divisive figure. I personally, given what he has been through at Luton, given the relegation last season, but also having to watch his captain Tom Lockyer twice, collapse on the pitch. He's an incredibly emotional guy anyway. Dan Story's interview with him in iSport a couple of months ago showed that. He's someone who really struggles not to feel to the max, and you can see that in his interviews. And after the Borough game, he looked defeated. Here, he kind of came out swinging, and he said that he's not going to apologise for it because he didn't think it was his fault, and it was individual players who'd let down what was a very good team performance. And when you watch the highlights back, you have to agree. Mengi with a really poor clearance for the first, Tahit Chong having his pocket picked for the second, a couple of missed opportunities. And this probably wasn't a game that they deserved to lose 4-2. And for me, if I'm a Luton fan and you want to get behind Edwards, you're probably happier seeing him come out with a bit of fight and a bit of spice rather than kind of rolling over and saying, I don't want to let people down. So they've got a couple of home games now. The home form has been much better than their away form, as per everyone else in the league. So it's going to be interesting to see how the players respond to, probably for the first time, a bit of tough love from someone who's normally someone who'll put their arm around the shoulder, rather than ask players to publicly at least to improve.
They are a team, George. I would say probably unlike more than any other in the league, that you would expect to be better at home than away from home, just because of the way they go about it, and because of how horrible it is to go there as a visiting team. I mean, we had that experience with Sunderland. We managed to win the game. It could have gone the other way. We got fortunate in a couple of moments, but the onslaught when they do have their tails up, when they just continue to pile cross after cross into the box, corner after corner, it is a really tough thing to withstand. So they've got these home games coming up this week against Swansea and Stoke. It does feel almost like a bit of a pivotal time for them, doesn't it?
For sure. I mean, there's nowhere to hide in those two games. I mean, two teams, Swansea and Stoke, are pretty hard to beat. Swansea in particular playing well at the moment. But they need to come away with those games for something to show for it. Partly to show some progress, but also because when you look at the league table right now, heading towards Christmas, they're in the relegation battle. They could go down if they don't improve. And there's nothing necessarily, I spoke a couple of weeks ago thinking that we were seeing an improvement in performances. And I still think that maybe away games against the likes of Borough and Norwich aren't the kindest way to judge a team. But they're Luton. They were the best of the three relegated sides last season for the most part. And this feel in the same way that we've seen Norwich get back-to-back wins at home. If Luton can find a way to have a similar week to that and right some of the wrongs and build some confidence again, it would be so important. If not, then I think there's nowhere to hide at Kenilworth Road, and that could be the end of his time at the club.
I would also like to take this opportunity to apologise to Luton fans for the way I celebrated the Sunderland goals from a Luton supporting section a few weeks ago. It didn't go down that well, George, so I'm not sure they're going to roll the red carpet out for me when I go back. But I do have an enormous amount of time for Luton at boardroom level and for Gary Sweet. I just think it's a brilliant story, and the way they've gone about things there. So I do wish them luck, just not when we play against them. And good luck as well. It sounds like Rob Edwards certainly needs it right now. Bristol City 4, Plymouth Argyle, and another manager that could do with a bit of a break is Wayne Rooney. Discuss 10 goals conceded this week against Norwich and Bristol City, and unfortunately not carrying too much threat at the other end as well, George.
Yeah, this is crazy. I don't think I've ever seen a team as bad compared to the rest of the division as they are away from home, and that is mitigated by the fact that at home they've only lost one game this season. So if we're going to criticise Rudy for the away form, then we have to give him credit for the home form by the same measure. John Percy has tweeted and written an article since we've been recording saying that Rooney's job is under threat, that his next two games, the first of which is at home to Milo Oxford on Saturday, are going to be crucial as to whether he keeps his job or not. But Hugh Davis, our friend of the pod, and NTT20.com aficionado, he did some research into Argyle's away games this season, where the home team has won in 8 of the 10 games. They've won 2-0 in 7 of the 10 games. They've won by 2 goals or more in 5 of them, 3 goals or more in 5 of them, and 4 goals or more in 4 of 10. That level of dominance from one team over another one in a league consistently is, I've just ever seen it before, at least not outside the Premier League, at least not outside of top flight, effectively. And again, this was another game where they defended resolutely for the first half. Grimshaw made some big saves, but they carried very little attacking threat whatsoever. They got a bit of misfortune in the goal, which was a deflected shot from Mehmeti, which hit Scott Twine in the midriff and went in. And then as soon as they went behind and they had to try and commit some men forwards, it was then just the floodgates opened and Bristol City wiped the floor with them without ever really being troubled from a defensive perspective. In my mind, Wayne Rooney, I'm surprised that he, as someone who played the game with such little fear, whose experience as an elite player, I would hope that he would be able to grab this group of players and just find a way to try and get them to replicate their performances at home park, away from home, and why them getting in a coach and travelling 2 hours to Bristol and going to Ashton Gate and has such a marked effect on their performance level, I just have no idea. But it's going to be incredibly hard for them to stay up unless they can find a way to improve their performance levels on the road. Because even when you look at the games they have drawn, against QPR it was a worldie for Morgan Whittaker. Against Derby it was a deflected effort from range from Randall. Like, they're not creating any opportunities at all away from home. And then, as you saw, Dave, at home it's a different story where they beat Sunderland. They conceded a lot of chances, but at least they carry an attacking threat.
Well, I mean, I think Sunderland should have been out, out of sight in that game before losing the game. And Wayne would probably disagree with that, but I think they have shown a bit of fight. I mean, and that is one thing that they have that I think you must be clinging to around those home performances. The spirit. They've had to come back a couple of times to win games, and they've done that very well. So. I mean, it's difficult. He is someone that when you spend any time with Wayne, that he clearly knows football absolutely inside out. The measure is how he communicates that to his group of players and find a way to be a little bit more effective on their travels. Because as you say, it's as much as anything, George, when you're losing games by that volume, it's the impact that it has on the group in terms of their confidence, which makes it even harder then to try and turn that round in front of your own fans. So difficult times for Wayne Rooney. Let's talk about the game that you already mentioned from yesterday. Derby County 1, Sheffield Wednesday 2. Wednesday going behind early on, but found a way to get back into the game and won it right at the death. But Derby fans, I suppose, George, are going to be left wondering how they've managed to lose both home games this week.
Yes. Before I talk about this, I should just quickly say, so I don't get in trouble, Dave, from Bristol City fans, credits Bristol City for scoring 4 goals against Argyle, because otherwise they'll get angry with me. But most teams do it. Anis Mehmeti was very good indeed. Derby Wednesday. I mean, Derby go 2-0 down at home to Swansea midweek, and then an absolute onslaught on the Swansea goal, but are unable to find a way to level the game up to 2-2 and lose that one. Here, I watched this one. Dave, you'll be sad to hear I was watching this rather than watching you guys in the studio ahead of
I think that is a bit disappointing. Yeah.
I did hear your commentary in the first couple of minutes in the Chelsea Aston Villa game, though.
Do you think I've got a chance, George? Do you know what? Can I just say about this, because this is the only time I will get to talk about this in a public forum. When that first game starts and you are at another location, okay, you are relying on a quite a small monitor to be able to see what's going on. At that time, the food arrives because you've been there since 9:30 in the morning, and the last thing that you want to be thinking about is doing commentary on a game where you can barely make out which player is which. So actually, it was one of those situations where I thought, oh, this is interesting. Let's have a go at this. And then as it sort of clocked on to 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I thought, this is quite enjoying this. Right, I'm going to get into this now. Let's hope this carries on for the entire half. And at that point, I got the message in my ear, right, we've got comms back. You can throw back to Bill. At which point, everyone else was utterly delighted and relieved, and I was left a little bit disappointed. Anyway, on you go.
the next stage of your career, commentary. I mean, it was this first 10, 15, 20 minutes from Derby was, I mean, Sheffield Wednesday couldn't get out at all. And when Ebu Adams scored, it may have only been after 10 minutes, but it had been coming. Derby started the game so well. And credit to Wednesday, because they kind of worked their way back into the game without creating any chances, if that makes sense. Kind of the last 25 minutes or so of the first half, they carried next to no attacking threat whatsoever, but they were able to get their foot on the ball, and they were able just to, alleviate some of the pressure and stop the wave after wave of Derby attack. And that meant that even though they hadn't really had any goal-scoring opportunities, going into half-time, you felt like it was still a relatively open game. And I think that had quite a big impact on the way the second half went. So credit for Royal for doing that. But there were 2 key players here. James Beadle pulled off 2 or 3 brilliant saves to keep the score at 1-0. And then Barry Bannan just adding to his list of incredible goals. Like, what a goal this was. Like, just caressing a bouncing ball with his left foot. It was half lob, half screamer with a defender on the line. He just manages to pull out these incredible goals with that left foot at times where Wednesday need it most. And then later on in the game, if we had VAR, it may have been disallowed. Jamal Lowe getting on the end of a Patterson cross and diverting it home in injury time. Derby, absolutely did not deserve to lose this game. Jerry Yates will feel like he should have done better with the chance to put them back ahead. But Wednesday will be over the moon. 2 away games in a week at Hull and at Derby in 6 points. After a difficult start to the season, after that initial opening day demolition of Argyle, I think Wednesday and Danny Royal are back on track again, and we'll be looking up at the playoff places and seeing that they'll feel like there's no reason why they can't challenge for them.
Just on Barry Bannan, we were sort of watching the goals go in from our studio. We keep across everything, we try to on a Sunday, and we'll have that interest in the Championship. And we were talking about Barry Bannan. I was talking about him with Roy Keane, who was full of praise for him. And just Roy to paraphrase Roy, what a player this guy is, and what an extraordinary career he's had. We mentioned this, George, with Mason Burstow about finding your level, and I think Roy's point was, Barry Bannan has probably got the quality to have played at a higher level and played more Premier League football. But for whatever reason, he's found himself in the Championship and even in League One, and he's just been brilliant at that level. And he's taken so much, I would imagine, so much joy, so much fulfillment from being such a key contributor at that level, and to still be doing it at his ripe old age, I think he's fantastic, and he's a great example to a lot of other people. Danny Röhl is someone I think is very interesting. They're edging their way, upwards towards the playoff picture, and if you think about where they were last season before Danny Röhl arrived, this continues to be, I think, one of the terrific jobs of Championship football that we've seen, Championship management that we've seen in the last couple of years. I'm fortunate to spend quite a bit of time with Danny in the past, and he's someone that I really admire. He's a person that I have a lot of time for, and I think has got a lot of ability. What have you seen in him this year that's been, if anything, George, that has been different from the upward trend from last season?
They started this season with a change of shape, and it worked very well on opening day against Argyle, and then the results turned, and he was very quick to revert back to the three at the back that we saw them be so strong with last season. So I guess a lack of stubbornness. Looking at Blackpool, for example, where Neil Critchley kind of refused to change shape and ended up costing him his job. I think for Röhl to immediately understand that the change he made in the summer wasn't working and revert back to type has worked well. I think the ability to continue to get the most out of Bannan, it's impressive that Röhl is someone who demands a hell of a lot physically from his players in terms of their pressing intensity, and yet still able to accommodate someone in Bannan who effectively won't give you anything in terms of the press himself. He's someone who's a mercurial footballer but needs runners around him, and I think Röhl's ability to continue to get the best out of him at a higher level than previously in League One is impressive. And it may not be a footballing technical point, but the most impressive thing for me about Danny Röhl is he's come into a club who were on their knees after the Xisco Munoz appointment, after their promotion, he's come into a club where Chansiri, the owner, is not popular with the fan base. This shouldn't be an environment that's particularly conducive to building a management career, and yet he has managed to unite the club off the pitch as well as on it through good results, but also through the way that he treats the fans, the way he talks about the club. He's very media savvy too. And I think that goes a long way. And I think a lot of managers maybe forget that actually being quite cute and clever with your personality and ensuring that you get buy-in from the fan base and probably the wider footballing public as well can actually be a very useful tool in terms of performance level. So from both a technical but also from a character assessment, he's basically the manager that all of us want. Someone who plays aggressive attacking football and can be a brilliant figurehead for your club off the pitch too.
Very nicely summed up, I think, on Danny Röhl. One to keep an eye on for sure. Coventry City 2, Cardiff City 2, Super Frankie Lampard. First game in charge. Why does he seem to attract so much negative attention, do you think, George?
People are very quick to judge managers who are players. I think there is probably a desire to say that they're rubbish. And
I think Frank said that himself, didn't he, in his press conference?
No, we've seen, take Steven Gerrard, for example, who obviously achieved great things at Rangers and then initially did pretty well at Villa, and then a poor spell at Villa, he was just routinely written off. He wouldn't have got a Championship job off the back of that. And I'm not saying that he's necessarily a good manager, but it's amazing how quick people were to do that. Whereas if he'd been, a former Rangers player without necessarily the same stature within the game, who'd come through at Rangers, done that job, gone to Villa, and what had happened after that, I think he would have been still very hireable. The same can be said, I think, of Frank Lampard, where the job he did at Derby was obviously very good in terms of results. There were some underlying number issues within that maybe put some people off. People hold it against him that he had Mason Mount and Tomori and other players on loan from Chelsea, but I would say that if you're Doug King and you're Coventry owner, hiring Frank Lampard may be meaning that you get 3 or 4 loanees from Chelsea who are the pick of the bunch they're going to loan out is probably quite a good reason to hire somebody. He did a very good job at Chelsea to start with in his first spell before it tailed off. No, I'm not sitting here saying I think he's going to be good. I think jury is massively out on his management career, and the fact that it's Joe Edwards alongside him rather than Jody Morris could have a big impact on that from a negative or a positive standpoint too. But yeah, I agree. It's, Dave, you'd have worked with him a lot and you'll know him personally. And I think, if you don't mind me saying, there was a moment at Oxford where there was a possibility of him coming to the club when you were there. I'd be interested to know where you think Lampard, because frankly, if this doesn't go well, it's hard to see a way back for him at this kind of level as a head coach.
Yeah, there's loads to sort of go at with Frank. He could have an amazing life, George, right? So he's done very well for himself through his football career. Obviously, he's financially independent already and doesn't have to worry about working. In a very fortunate position that he is. He could go and come on television. He can work for Sky or any other broadcaster, and we'd be very happy to have him. But he really wants to do this. He's got a burning desire to be a very successful football manager, and he believes that he's capable of doing that. My own sort of history with Frank goes back to, I was working with him at an event just after he finished his playing career, and I think he was sort of working out which way he wanted to go, and he was having a little bit of a flirtation with the media at that stage, and doing his coaching badges. And I heard him speak in this coaching conference, and I thought to myself, there is a young man who is going to be a successful football manager. I've always been a true believer in intelligence being a very important marker for being a successful football manager, and an ability to communicate. What you also have to possess is, depending on what level you're going in at and the surroundings, is you have to be a very good coach. And I think that is probably the biggest question I have about Frank in terms of his development. Now, I think that Joe Edwards is an interesting selection to take with him, because I think we'd all say what we know of Joe is that he is a very good coach. So maybe that is a big step in the right direction in terms of Frank's team. He's also got Chris Jones with him, who I know is a really good operator, really sound guy, that will be a very important sounding board for Frank, and has been already. With Oxford, just to give you a little bit of background on that one, when we were trying to find a replacement for Michael Appleton, who you'll remember was poached that time by Leicester City to go and work alongside the dearly departed Craig Shakespeare, we were starting from scratch a little bit, and I took it upon myself, because I knew Frank, to go and have a conversation with him, and sat down. I basically gave him a couple of days, I think, George, maybe it was even a weekend, to think about Oxford United as a possibility and a place to start his coaching career. And we met in a hotel in London, just the two of us, on a Monday morning. And it was the start of a week in which we were going to go and meet some other managers. And Frank really surprised me, because he didn't sit there sort of with a blank sheet of paper saying, well, what can you tell me about the team, or what can you tell me about League One? He was giving me the answers from day one. He was saying, I've spent the weekend looking at your squad, assessing what you have, and this is what I think you were up against in League One. He wanted to know straight away, like as most managers do, of much more experience, what kind of budget he would have at his disposal. And I think, I gave him as many answers as I possibly could, and he asked for a couple more days to think about things. And I think, it probably wasn't the wrong decision at that time for him to go away and say, I don't think this is the right step for me in terms of my first job as a manager. I think he had questions probably about how ambitious Oxford United were at that time in terms of that level of investment that he would require to be successful. So he then took his first steps at Derby County, and the rest is history. But I'm pretty sure that he would have done all that forensic work again on Coventry City, and he will have been really impressed with what he's seen under the bonnet. I think we all know what they possess in terms of their potential. So I don't see any reason why we don't start to see an upward trend with Coventry City, and I think we'll probably all have questions if we don't see that, and I think that would be fair.
It's interesting what you said earlier about betting market managers. I remember that summer I was at Glastonbury without any phone signal, and that probably the same Monday morning I came out, we were driving out, I was getting a lift with my friend, wasn't feeling too fresh in the back seat, and as soon as I got phone signal, the first thing I did was to check the Oxford Next Manager market to see what had happened over the weekend. and seeing Frank Lampard's name as favourite, I thought I was dreaming. It was a surreal moment to come out of Glastonbury and see that at the top of the. So sometimes they do get it right because you were meeting him that morning. So,
well, it depends who decides to leak what information to whom. I think George as well. And do you know what? Sometimes it doesn't do a football club any harm to be linked with someone like Frank Lampard.
Correct.
So maybe that was an inside job on that occasion. I couldn't possibly comment.
I will. I'll run through the game quickly. Lampard's first game ended with some relief, I guess. Cardiff ahead twice in the game. Lampard, Ephraim Mason-Clark getting his first league goal for Coventry was a big moment because he struggled to really find his feet at Coventry so far. Hasn't necessarily played in the position that he wants to off the left-hand side, but with Haji Wright injured, he should get an opportunity to do so. He's a player that I am very, very sure, if given the opportunity by Lampard to fill that role, will do so well. Cardiff, winless in 5, a pretty good performance this one. Still no news as to whether or not Omar Ritza we can expect to get the job full-time, still interim manager.
He's a patient man, isn't he?
Frustrated that, I know. Well, yeah. It kind of feels like... I understand why, from a Cardiff perspective, they're not. They haven't just appointed him off the back of the good results, and the fact they're winless in 5, I guess, maybe justifies it to an extent. But you don't want to be doing your job not knowing if the club are going to.
So if they haven't won in 5, why have they appointed somebody else?
Well, I know. I don't know. I have no idea. But I think he's still, the performance was still good, and they're still playing well and playing the way that Cardiff fans want them to play. But yeah, we'll see. We've got a few more draws to get through.
Swansea 2, Pompey 2. Swansea found themselves 2 down, but came back to take the point. I suppose you might have predicted, George, I don't know, Swansea winning reasonably comfortably in this game beforehand?
Possibly. Swansea playing well at the moment and were definitely the better side at 2-0 down, as can be quite easy. But there were 2 kind of star men on the pitch here. Josh Murphy, the star in the first half, brilliant assist, like such a good ball across for the first. Then a really well taken second too. He showed, I couldn't believe it when early in the season when Pompey fans were saying he was lazy. He's not lazy. He is scrappy, and that was shown in abundance with both the assist and the goal here. Persistent, direct goal threat, loads of quality, and some Oxford fans might hate it, but I personally will always thank him for what he did at Wembley in the summer, and I'm delighted to see him doing well at Pompey. Second half, albeit maybe end of the first half, it was all about Liam Cullen, who put the cross in for Ogilvy's own goal, and then a really well taken goal as well. He's come back from Wales duty in fine form, having, I think it was 2 assists and 2 goals in his last game for Wales. A goal and an assist in the previous 2 to this, and then an assist and a goal here. So Cullen playing well. Swansea, for the most part, again, they'll be a team who feel like they're playing better than their results suggest, but I think it's probably a matter of time until they do pick up some wins.
Oxford United 1, Millwall 1, and I'll be honest, George, when I saw the scoreline, I flicked it on Saturday. I thought this could be tough for Oxford to come back from this. But they did.
We did. Good news for betting show followers with Japhet Tanganga scoring as I put up on the show, which was good. Albeit I wasn't very happy about it. So any Oxford fans listening, don't worry, I did not celebrate when it went in. But yeah, Millwall were by far the better team here in the first half. It was kind of wave after wave of pressure, and Oxford couldn't really get out. Will Volk's taken off at half time, replaced by Idris Al Mazouni, which improved Oxford in midfield. They got a bit of a foothold in the game. It was actually the introduction of Owen Dale on the right hand side for Matt Phillips that kind of really changed the game, and it was Oxford who were in the ascendancy in the last 20 minutes or so. Tyler Goodrum with yet another fantastic strike with his left foot again, as was the case against Preston a couple of months ago. Just a really well struck shot into the top right hand corner. It was probably Oxford who finished the game in the ascendancy after the equaliser. So Millwall will feel like they should have put the game to bed early on, but Oxford will feel, despite carrying very little attacking threat for the most part, they also didn't concede a shot after the 52nd minute, and will feel like they were good value for the draw in the end.
That's not a bad point at all, I don't think, against a good Millwall
Agreed.
side. Preston 1, West Bromwich Albion 1. The draw specialist, the Baggies. 9 draws in their last 10. I have to say I was hugely flattered, George, when West Brom came to Sunderland last week and made their intentions very, very clear from the get-go.
It's funny this, because Corberan had slowly been turning West Brom into a side that kind of dominated the ball and liked to dominate the ball. And it feels like in this run, he's kind of reverting back to type and going back into being a manager who's very, very adept at setting up a team in a low block to prevent the opposition from creating chances. And they've lost a bit of their attacking thrust because of that, albeit the form of Tom Fellows has clearly dipped. Carlin Grant with the opening goal here to put Baggies ahead. They're a team who, under Corberán, generally when they go ahead, are very good at seeing off teams and defending their lead. But it was a good finish by Emil Rees to make it 1-1. So, it's a frustration for Baggies. Again, their fans are getting quite annoyed at their kind of early good start coming undone, albeit not losing games. But yeah, as you say, surprising to see. I hold Carlos Corberán in a really high regard. And it does feel like their evolution has hit the buffers a little bit in terms of playing style.
Watford 0, QPR 0 was a game that happened. Are we going beyond that?
We've spoken a lot. Probably not. All I'll say is a good week for QPR. QPR beating Cardiff on the road 2-0 midweek. They'll feel like they probably should and could have won this. Madsen missed one early. They spooned one over the bar from 2 yards out. Zan Salah hit the woodwork with a 1-1 late on. Watford's home record continues somehow. It does feel like Daniel Bachmann's goal is blessed at Vicarage Road. But 4 points in a week maintains their very, very good start under Tom Cleverley.
Good luck to Martí Cifuentes. I hope their improvement continues. He is another manager that I have a soft spot for. Right, before we move on to League Two, where there are a couple of games, it was, of course, FA Cup second round weekend. George, run through the big stories for us.
Tamworth beating managerless Burton on penalties. This was one that I think the Burton fans and ownership, the Nordic Football Group who bought them in the summer, really could have done without home game against a local rival, a non-league team, and then losing on penalties was not ideal. It kind of compounds issues with this manager process where they still haven't replaced Mark Robinson, and there seems to be very little indication of them doing so. Fans will hope this is the nadir. They will hope that this is the moment that the Nordic Football Group instigates some action, because right now they're being knocked out by non-league teams in the FA Cup and they are circling the drain towards League Two. Dagenham beat AFC Wimbledon. AFC Wimbledon struggling at home at the moment after a really good start at home. Got to talk about Orient and their goalkeeper, Josh Keeley, scoring in the 99th minute with a brilliant glancing header against Oldham. Dan Adji then missed a penalty in extra time before scoring in the 121st minute to win the tie. God, it must be tough being an Oldham fan on Saturday, watching a goalkeeper score against you in the 99th, and then when you think you got penalties. But the one thing to really mention here, and probably a very short rant, Harbour Town going to Reading, a game for some reason not televised, despite the fact that Harbour Town are a 7th tier team travelling to a recent Premier League side. It would have been a great opportunity as well for Reading's current plight and the Sell Before We Die movement to get some much needed national coverage. Anyway, not on TV, and normally had FA Cup replays still been a thing, Harbour would have been rewarded for their brilliant performance and the 3-3 draw with a replay back at theirs and some TV money, but alas, it's not the case, which for replays to have been abolished in round 1 and round 2, I just cannot understand the logic for that whatsoever. So a shame for them, but an amazing display, and they came very close to winning it late on with a header at the back post that just went into the side netting. Reading, probably the worst possibility for them. Ruben Sella has been very clear that the cup is not a priority, so for them to have to go into extra time and play 30 extra minutes in order to see off a 7th tier side at home, probably not. I'd hazard a guess they probably may have preferred to go out, albeit we'll see who they draw this evening. Yeah,
they might get Manchester United, and then suddenly it becomes a bit more worthwhile to be in the competition, especially if you get them away from home. Shall we move on to League Two, George, at this juncture?
Yes.
Tidy up there. Carlisle 1, Crew 1. What stood out for you here?
Not loads, to be honest. It wasn't a great game. Crew coming back from 1-0 down early with Jack Lancaster scoring a penalty late. It looked like a pretty soft penalty. We haven't got a great camera angle, but if I was going to say from the angle we got if it was a dive or not, I'd probably lean on dive, but penalty given. Lancaster dispatches the penalty. Some good news, I guess, for Carlisle. I know that they squandered a lead here, but they are off bottom spot now. They're unbeaten in 4, in some signs maybe that Mike Williamson is starting to get a grip on this Carlisle side.
And Fleetwood 0, Colchester 0 was a game that happened.
if any game has ever happened, this one really happened. There was a shot off the bar from Helm, a couple of opportunities, but nothing else really of note. So that brings this episode of Not Top 20 to a close. Thank you very much, Dave.
We've got through it, George, without too many issues.
I told you it'd take an hour. It's been about 2.
That's my fault. I talked too much.
Thank you. I mean, normally it's Ali, so, you can't compete with him. Thank you, Dave, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to guest host the pod with me today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And it made the rush back from Liverpool. I arrived home at 1 a.m.
Wow.
That's life of Super Sunday, and it's all part of the fun of the fair. But I enjoyed rifling through some championship information on the way home and this morning to bring myself up to speed. But George, you're the star. Well done, and congratulations again to Ad.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll be back again on Thursday with the betting show, and back again next Monday too. As I said at the top of the show, we do have our merch, so if you want to buy hoodies, t-shirts, quarter zips, mugs, I know Dave's going to go off and buy one of our caps immediately after this show. Make sure you click on the link in the show description. That's on YouTube and on if you're listening to this as a podcast as well. But yeah, that brings this episode to a close. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. And as Ali would say, go well.